StarCraft 2 is a complex game. It is filled with decisions. These encompass micro, macro, positioning, and every single little piece of minutia underneath one of those headings. As your knowledge grows, you find more and more edges, parts of the game where you can vary your choices to gain advantage. As you progress, the ability to read the current game state becomes integral to understanding what is at stake with each and every decision you make in StarCraft. That essentially is what we're going to be talking about today, guys. Welcome to the show. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out in chat. Everyone who's watching on YouTube, welcome to the PiG Daily, episode number 118. And today we're going to be talking about understanding the game state. Specifically, how to look at a game if you don't really understand what that means, no matter what the situation, whatever craziness and madness has happened, and be able to weigh up what the situation is, who's ahead in what area, who's behind in what area, and how that can influence your decisions. And this is no easy task. This is not something which is going to be super simplistic and just obvious and easy to do. This is something which takes years and years to develop, but then it is the most important thing for the strategy of StarCraft, for your decision making. Every time you want to be clever, do something smart in an RTS game, it's all about understanding your strengths, your weaknesses, your whole position in the game, and then using that information to make educated decisions about how to progress forward and potentially beat your opponent. So I have one of my own replays here, and the reason we have this replay is this is just a really crazy, long, weird game. Lots of times where the economy gets sort of reset on both sides, different compositions to what we might normally see. And as a result, there's a lot of things which you need to take into account. This isn't going to be a game where you simply look at it and you say to yourself, oh yeah, I've seen this before. It's Lurkers versus Chargelots and Immortals. If the Zerg player has 70 drones before, 6 minutes, then usually he will win with the Lurker push. And if he is below, 65 drones, then he will probably lose. There's no way to look at this and have any sort of cheat sheet way to understand exactly what's going on here. And that's going to be perfect for our entire purposes, right? That's what we want. We want a game which is messy, which is weird, so we can struggle to figure out exactly what's going on in it. What actually kind of led me to talking about today's topic was a common question I get, whether I'm going to be coaching someone or it's in a YouTube comment or, someone emails it to me or whatever. I see this question more than anything, and it always says, my biggest problem is with decision making. When should I go roaches with my Zerglings, or when should I go Banelings instead? When do I make blink rather than charge? What does scouting mean? And obviously you can kind of break these down individually, and definitely, learn their strengths and weaknesses and everything. But all of those answers are never going to be as simple as you always do this or you always do that. It's always going to be very situational, and big part of the answer is always going to be, well, it depends how you want to play. StarCraft isn't a game where it's like, you just do this because it's the best thing to do. Sometimes you will hear people give you that sort of advice, but what they're actually doing is saying, well, this is the best way to macro. This is the best way to play the most generic, solid game, the way the pro gamers are playing it right now. Or this is the best way to just kill your opponent with a cheesy attack. But there are so many different decisions in there, and actually understanding them yourself is where StarCraft becomes exciting and interesting. It's where you come to be able to actually overcome your own problems, rather than simply blindly copying others. It's where strategy really comes to be very exciting. So essentially, yeah, you want to start to analyze games individually. You want to be able to come to your own conclusions, as we will about this replay here. You want to think about what makes good reactions, what that scouting means, different plays and ways you can react to those things, how to adjust your gameplay after a streak of losses on your own is something you definitely want to be gaining out of this. So understanding these fundamental concepts and really being able to kind of read the state of the game is definitely going to be the most important thing we're looking for today. Using that then to make decisions, we will touch on that, but it is mostly about understanding the state of the game. For a beginning player, we often kind of tell them, hey, just focus on macro. Don't focus too much on the complex details. Right now, you just need to kind of get your basic mechanics down. You just need to work on that for now. And that's something I've been guilty of as well. And I think it's a good thing for newer players to focus on, is like just get used to building units, spending your money at first. But at a certain point, you're always going to need to explore the wider range of StarCraft. You're going to need to look at it in kind of that big variable, just so much different things can happen, and learning how to analyze those individually without just having a set playbook you just read from and measure up against. So guys, the biggest things you want to always be looking at, of course, is army and economy. These are the two most reliable metrics in StarCraft. Army, how big your army is, of course, how much money has gone into it, as some units are more valuable than others. It's not just a supply question. But then there's also other little subdivisions, upgrades, tech, what upgrade, not just like 1-1, but also baneling speed or something like that is very powerful. Upgrade something complete. Like the Adept Glaives upgrade, which just kicked in this replay. And then, in economy as well. Economy isn't necessarily just your worker count. You do need to take into account as well, are those workers actually got, do they each have an individual mining patch? Is there enough space for these workers to all mine from efficiently? Is there going to be points where a base is denied, and then so for a period of time, that economy actually isn't as powerful as the worker count might say? There's always a lot of little details you definitely need to look at and pay attention to in these games, and that does make a big difference. This game, as you can see, already starts out a little bit special, a little bit exciting and interesting. So let's already start out. So this is a topic which I think is great for new players. It's great for experienced players as well, because a lot of the time we do get stuck in analyzing things in a sort of mundane way. But yeah, let's look at the game right now. Okay, so economy, army, who's ahead? Let's start with a very basic assessment right now and kind of go through this whole thing. All right, well, we've got 30 drones versus 43 probes. Right now, I'd say it's looking like Zerg is behind in that economy, right? However, notice that there's no third base down yet for me as the Protoss player. So what we can kind of see at this point is if the Zerg can then saturate this third base, the Zerg will be ahead. But right now, the Zerg is behind in that economy. The problem is, the Protoss player, me, maxed out on those workers. So any extra workers I build now, not going to be useful. You can go up to about 18 or 19 probes on each base. Not going to be useful until that third base actually finishes. So the Zerg player now has caught up in workers. If he's able to squeeze out a bunch more, then things are actually going to be looking really good. He's going to be way ahead. However, what we're going to see here is a big Adept Phoenix pressure, right? And these Phoenix coming in and harassing drones. And we see that this is actually exceptionally crucial. Something which an experienced player takes for granted. Well, Phoenix harassing, Adepts pressuring, of course you always do this. But a newer player might not necessarily think in the same terms, which is why it's important to point out exactly what's happened here. The Protoss player has invested in better army, better units, but because they are about to fall behind in economy, if they don't use those units, the Protoss player needs to pressure, force the Zerg to build a lot of units, and as a result, the Zerg wasn't able to freely drone through that period, go right up to, say, 60 workers. Now the Protoss player's third is finishing. The probes are going to be able to rally over here and be effectively mining. And we're going to actually see, oh, okay, the Protoss player managed to hold that advantage. I managed to kind of hang on to that throughout this. And that's your most basic assessment of economy, right? But then we're already seeing how kind of decision-making can start to be influenced by our understanding of how our economy measures up. If your economy is behind at a certain point, but you're ahead in army, then you want to go attack. Something I saw yesterday, right? Someone was relinking the old Artosis quote on Reddit, where it's, if your opponent defends, expand. If your opponent attacks, defend. If your opponent expands, attack. And it's this very simple kind of idea behind decision making, but it really is such an integral part of how you make decisions in StarCraft, and being able to understand the game state well enough allows you to kind of follow that. And it is such a good, simple way of summing up really the majority of what you end up doing in terms of decision making. You're like, oh, I'm down in economy but up in army, I need to try and push you and do damage in order to equalize that. I'm ahead in economy but down in army, I need to defend as much as I just need to sit back, pump out army, and try to use defender's advantage, get my closer reinforcements, maybe use good positioning. I need to use that to try to catch back up in that worker count. So I really love that quote because it is such a simple way of simplifying such a complex thing. There's so much that actually goes into it. You know, I mentioned army value and upgrades, I mentioned economy, but there's also positioning as well. There's so many things that go into the army situation in terms of how does your tech match up against their tech, how do your compositions clash in the map, and all of that sort of stuff. And This is not easy to tally up, guys. Remember, whenever you're watching a pro cast, you'll always hear the commentators say things like, oh, so he's now getting up his 7 more gateways, so he's going up to 10 gateways. The Zerg right now has 48 drones. And they'll kind of go through this list of what both players have, and you can tell the commentators are actually sort of tallying up as they speak who's actually ahead right now, what are the advantages. So let's take a look in this game, actually. Right now, we can actually start to see some very interesting things. In the upgrades, we see +2 attack versus no weapons upgrade. Okay, so +1 weapons is about to finish for Protoss. So we can say, okay, Zerg's ahead in upgrades. But Zerg is way behind in workers right now. Way behind, but almost double the army supply. And not only that, but Swarm Hosts, a unit which is very good aggressively, but quite poor defensively. And we can say to ourselves, well, right now, if the Zerg doesn't attack, Protoss is going to run away with this game. Protoss has 3 bases fully saturated, Protoss has a sick economy, and Protoss is going to get, like, really crazy. But, you know, Vivid here, he's got this game knowledge and understanding of the game. He knows that if he attacks right now, he's got to do damage. He's got to stop that Protoss economy from just flowing crazily out of control. And so he has this attack, which obviously he's already been building up to. But he knows he 100% has to start doing damage here. He can't just sit back against a Protoss that's up a base and mining on him. And so he starts launching in locusts from all sides, nidusing out queens and swarm hosts. And the game starts devolving into chaos very quickly. And what we see here is it's like, okay, cool, I was ahead in economy, but was I really? I was ahead in economy for like 30 seconds, a minute, like by any significant amount, but a minute, maybe a minute and a half, and then bam, the Nexus is gone. A whole bunch of these workers can't do anything. Yet another Nexus, gone. And suddenly I'm actually down at way less economy because he hit this so crisply. But if he waited just another minute, I could have made like all these Archons, added in a whole bunch of charge lots, maybe some Immortals. Like, I probably could have just hung on and overwhelmed through sheer number superiority. Like, it would have actually been insane. And this is where you get a big sense of timing as well. If you can understand, you know, okay, you really need to do damage right now, your opponent's just going to run away with that economy. That starts to make a big difference. So what's interesting as well, as we kind of watch through this game and everything devolves into chaos and ridiculousness, and it is going to get sillier as the game goes on. It's just going to get completely insane. There's a lot of interesting things which happen here. I'm like desperately trying to defend. Let me put that back on faster speed. I've got charge lots countering in his base. Everything's going crazy. I'll leave this on my camera from now on. So as these games get into these very odd scenarios, what about not just watching the replay and tallying up the sort of way I have been doing, comparing the army value to the economy and figuring out, oh, okay, you're behind in economy, you need to attack because you're up in army, all this sort of stuff. How else do you start to tally up these situations? And most importantly, how do you do that in a game? And this is something people always say. It's like, well, how the hell do I actually work on my game sense? How do I improve this? How do I put this into action myself when I'm in a game? It's so bloody hard. And a big part of that is actually watching replays and so on. But I think the biggest part is actually learning to understand out of game. And I think if you can learn to analyze a replay, understand why you lost in the positioning and when you were ahead and behind, then you can very quickly transfer that over to in-game sense. If you're unable to figure out when you were ahead, when you were behind, what your advantages were in a replay, then you're sure as hell not going to be able to do it in a live game. So a lot of StarCraft and a lot of learning in StarCraft is actually about just steadily analyzing games and learning from your mistakes, learning how to break them down, see what you can do better in future. It's not like every single pro StarCraft player just hops into a game and magically knows what to do the next time they're in that scenario. The game's way too complicated and hard for that. So players have to kind of figure this out as they go along, analyze their replays and work on that. And this is something which does take a long time to work on, but once you kind of learn this formula for analyzing a replay, as you can see me doing here and saying, oh, you know, I'm ahead in economy here, but I'm behind in that, you start to really develop this as a skill. And obviously it's easy for me to talk about a lot of the minutiae. I can say things like right now, I can look at this situation and I can say, these swarm hosts are very good aggressively, but they're very poor defensively. And he's rebuilding a lot of swarm hosts, even though I just caught a lot of them. So if he's on my side of the map and he's hitting like all the different bases, I don't really have enough units to very easily cover all my bases and defend. But I know that swarm hosts suck at defending because they've got a timed life on these locusts, so you can move forward like I just did there, force out some locusts, and then simply run back. You can also do cute things like shoot them down with the phoenix. But the real formula here is force him to use his locusts on the defense so that he can't use them on the offense. So I'm sort of defending through attacking. And this is just a very specific unit interaction to Swarm Host. You don't really do this in many other scenarios. If I was pressuring right now into Ravagerling, Baneling, when I'm down at like 40, 50 army supply, I can tell you, I would be so dead. I would just get flanked, I would get wrapped around. The army, you know, Lings and Banelings don't just expire when you pull back for 20 seconds. No, they're going to wrap around you and just kill you. If I was playing against that composition, I would be sitting back at home and turtling and defending and playing this completely differently. And that comes down to a lot of experience, a lot of understanding how the units work. But how do you develop that yourself? It really is about playing a lot of games, watching pro games, looking at how those units work, constantly thinking about how do units work in different scenarios. Is this unit just good if I surprise my opponent? Where are the strengths and weaknesses? I mean, a couple good examples of that, right? Charge lots, Archons. Seems like a pretty good composition right now against, well, Roaches and Swarm Hosts. What if he has some Banelings mixed in there? Even just 15 speed Banelings, if I take a pitched battle against that, all the charge lots are going to be pretty much completely negated. Unless I can somehow target them all down with the Archons, pull the charge lots back, and then bring the charge lots into the tail end of the battle, hoping he doesn't have any Banelings in reserve. So Banelings are this unit which can really hurt the power of charge lots. They can really damage that. Void Rays, a unit which are incredibly powerful until a good number of Hydralisks actually get out. So you can see like these back and forths and compositions, and just learning to understand those over time will help you kind of analyze these games. But most importantly, understand, did I miss an opportunity to go kill my opponent? Was I way up in army supply, way down in economy, and then I just sat at home and defended when I should have been attacking? Starting to recognize those sort of mistakes is also key, because it's not always just about what composition is good, but should I have really given him the time to get to this composition? Was there a huge window where I could have killed this Protoss player before he massed up carriers? And all of these are very, good questions. These are all things where if you simply work very hard on developing that game sense, on analyzing a lot of these games, you will get exceptionally good at figuring all of that stuff out. Let's put that on my camera. Little anecdote for you guys, actually. Little story. So I started playing chess again. I used to play in like the basic school competitions when I was a kid because my parents wanted me to and stuff. And I never really studied the game at all. I never practiced. I never wanted to read any of those boring chess books. I thought it was terribly boring to do that. I just like to just move the pieces around and see if I could win. And because I'd played a little bit from a pretty young age, I was decent enough at it. But I never really understood any kind of concepts behind it. I'd try and like 4-move checkmate kids and stuff. It would be kind of silly. I've started recently, since what, the end of last year, so a couple months now, started playing chess on my phone again, against a few different commentators and pro players and stuff. Shout out to Drogo. Thanks for all those chess ELO points, man. So anyway, basically I was playing this, right, and I had no idea of how to figure out the game state and look at the board and figure out, how am I ahead? When am I ahead? When am I behind? And it was this really interesting process, because I feel like that kind of reminded me of what it's no doubt like playing StarCraft as a player who hasn't played 50,000 games like myself. Even if you're someone who's played, a couple hundred games or 1,000 games. Alright, TB, shut up, bro. I'm sorry, man, you're too loud. I'm gonna turn my game sound down a little bit. There we go. Cool. I love the TB voice back, but that's all good. So anyway, I thought it was a lot like, for a player who's even played 1,000 games but hasn't really had a chance to study the game as deeply as I have, and how it must be for them trying to figure things out. And the big thing which really changed everything for me was simply trying to figure out a few different concepts for which I could think about the game and try to measure it up. And the main ones were sort of board control, in terms of like reach and kind of having the pieces out on the board, covering as many squares as possible. So that was one of the big ones for me, was getting my pieces out on the board was one of the biggest concepts, which I saw as trying to have a good setup to give me the most possible options. Another one was tempo. Never making a move where my opponent could potentially just threaten that piece, and then I would have to pull it back and then obviously basically lose 2 moves for nothing, because that would just give my opponent twice as much time to set up on the board. I started to have a few different concepts as well. But once I had these concepts, I found that even though I really had no idea where the game was going to go, I could start to break it down. I could start to kind of look at the game and say, okay, well, right now I don't have a lot of pieces on the board. He has more than me. Even though I'm not sure how getting these pieces out on the board is going to help me in the future, if I can just generally follow the rule of getting them out, getting a lot of position on the map, on the board, it should help me out as the game progresses. It should help me out just kind of dealing with everything as the game goes on. And this is something which really helped me out, because suddenly then you're just going through general concepts of... It's kind of like following your macro concepts, where you're just like, okay, just build more stuff, get a good setup, get more tech. And it's about opening up your options, and that's what strategy games really are about. It's about giving yourself as many different opportunities, because there's so many different things that can go on. You can't just bank on one thing working, unless you're doing, a cheesy play, and then you can bank on it, but it's not particularly reliable. So it's something where you look at this and you say to yourself, okay, now I have this like certain metrics to like measure the game through, and I can look at a game of chess and I can say, you know what, I'm behind in pieces, but I'm up in tempo, and my pieces have better board control. I've got a better position on the board. And these sort of things actually allow me to analyze the game a lot better. Likewise, let's look at this game, guys. Let's go back a little bit and actually break this game down a little bit. 14 to 15 minutes where things start to fall to shit for me in this game. And we're not going to bother watching the rest of the game too badly, but let's take a look. 14 minutes, I just lost 2 bases. I've just rebuilt a 4th as like a 3rd. So I'm back on, 2 Nexus mining. I'm in a terrible position. I'm down 20 army supply. I'm down in upgrades. What do I have going for me right now? At this point, what the hell do I have going for me in this game? And this is something where, luckily, I was able to make this sort of assessment in-game, because I have experience using swarm hosts and against them. And I said, swarm hosts are bad on the defense. If I pressure, then I will waste the swarm host attacks. So I know I still have air superiority number 1. These Phoenix can pick up units that go off on their own and kill them. I can scout everything that's going on with them. So I'm definitely not going to be blind. I'm going to have sick vision. Yes, they can't engage the queens, but the queens aren't going to be able to push the Phoenixes off anywhere except one tiny corner of the map anyway. So I'm actually like, okay, if I can just totally nullify the swarm hosts, I can do that. But I am way behind in economy. I'm behind in upgrades. So, okay, air superiority, mobility is one advantage. In terms of the positioning, I have a little bit more mobility. I have a bit of air control. The other thing, the swarm hosts, not good when they're on the defense. So if I can keep this position up here, then I know I can nullify a big part of his advantage. That 40 army supply is basically all in swarm hosts, and I'm not letting them do anything right now. And that's really important, because other than that, I look at this and I say, army-wise, the Zerg's army is very mundane. This is very low tier. It's roaches, it's Zerglings, it's queens. I have Archons, I have Storm, I have Chargelots. My units are better than his. They're more efficient. Therefore, if I can just buy enough time, I will be able to win potentially in the long run, even though I'm way down in army supply, even though I think I'm down in economy quite a bit right now. But this is where you make these sort of reads, right? You look at this and you say, okay, cool. So these are these sort of advantages. I figured out the decision that I need to make, which is to nullify those swarm hosts by continually poking and pressuring, harass and scout with the Phoenix, and simply try to defend 2 bases, build up some economy, and go from there. And this is where he actually makes a fantastic decision. Vivid, I pull back a little bit too far from those locusts. He instantly has a very smart decision from the Zerg side, where he says, if my swarm hosts are just defending, they're not getting value. Therefore, this is the most important time to counterattack, do a pressure, because the moment I can pull PiG away from being on my side, my swarm hosts are going to become useful again. And check this out. As soon as I pull back, runs over here, bam, goodbye Nexus. He explodes back into these aggressive positions, starts hitting multiple bases, starts tearing my economy apart. So both of us are really assessing the game and seeing, what do I need to do to use my advantages right now? And that's what understanding the game state really gives you. It gives you this ability to adapt to the most chaotic and crazy situation and really try to use that advantage as best you can. We see here, tech structures going down in the main base, Robo and Templar Archives about to fall, catches 1 or 2 swarm hosts on retreat. But once again, my economy is just back down in the dumps. I am way down in the economy, half of his mining this whole time. But I'm like, okay, I can keep just wasting these locusts, get back in this aggressive position, keep doing this. And we start having this back and forth where I'm fighting for time. I just want to protect about two and a half mining bases, build up a big enough army, because I know the rest of his army sucks against mine. Charge lots of Archons, Storm, eventually I can add Immortals in. This is going to be amazing versus his kind of mid-tier army. So if I can just keep those Locusts back from just damaging my economy, if I can keep up this economy, I should be able to battle in there. And because I've still got Phoenix alive, I've still got great scouting, I'll have a Warp Prism a little bit later, I know that he's not going Hive. I know he's not going to hit me with Broodlords or Ultralisks, so I know simply hanging on with this composition, trying to nullify those Swarm Hosts, is enough damage. I keep sending counterattacks in to buy time as well. I know if I can just buy bits of time, pull him home, as my army gets bigger, it's going to perform better and better. You guys have seen Archon Immortal Stormballs up against Roaches and Queens and Zerglings, and even with Infestors being added in there, it really doesn't help him out all that much. But him, on the other hand, he says, hey, I'm getting pushed back, how can I keep attacking at the same time? Starts popping out Nidus Worms, these Locusts continuing to do masses of damage to my bases. And this is really cool, because we've got two very experienced players just playing very intelligently, both trying to use those advantages. And as chaotic as the game is, both of us are trying to push the game in the direction where we want to see it. And that's where things start to go. At this point of the game, I start to take into account psychology. I start to think about, he really just looks like he's focused on trying to kill me right now. And he's also doing a really good job with these Nidus Worms. But I say they're also very expensive. So very soon, I'm going to be backing off the center of the map. And I'm actually going to say, you know what? I need to focus more on defending these run-bys. He keeps sneaking Swarm Host by me. And I'm going to start up an extra Robotics because I lost my other one. And you'll notice I'm going to start spreading my defense all over the place. I'm still poking at this point for a little bit longer. I'm still constantly tagging his army because I've seen Infestors. I say, well, I'm very worried about Corrosive Bile Fungal. Let's constantly see where those Infestors are, keep tagging them with the Oracle. I start to build my own extra Oracles and Observers for detection. I want to start getting enough vision to shut down all the counterattacks, hunt down the Swarm Hosts wherever they are. I realize that I can swap into the mode of using counterattacks of Charge Lots a little bit more to distract him rather than my main army, and just focus on bringing my units back and actually defending my economy, because I'm starting to take way too much damage from all of these counters. I can't just keep, sitting back the way that I am and trying to keep him at home, because it's not working. I can't attack into creep anymore. His Swarm Hosts are just sitting on my side of the map. There's no point pressuring him. I'm adjusting, I'm flexing along with how things are going, and everything starts to change up a little bit. So we see Observers start to get out all over the place. He's constantly counterattacking. My probe count is in dire straits, but my Charge Lot counterattacks have been killing a lot of workers as well. He actually manages to take out all the Phoenix there with some nice Fungal Bile combos. I'm continuing to counterattack, continuing just trying to lock down some economy and buy time, trying to rebuild some workers. This Warp Prism here, a smart adjustment. A single Void Ray as well. You might be like, why is there a Void Ray and a Warp Prism right now? Well, I've noticed he just doesn't have any good, consistent anti-air. As a result, I know a Void Ray always has the potential to just chase off his army on my side of the map, potentially. I know that a Warp Prism being able to hit his main base is going to really negate a lot of his power and ability. I know it can pull him home. And so this Warp Prism comes in, starts warping in units in the main base. I've got a Void Ray on the top, an Oracle in the middle. I've got Charge Lots on the south. Suddenly, I realize that because his army can't necessarily engage into Storm Archon, if I can simply keep track of where his army is at all times, stop him counterattacking me, I won't be able to give him the opportunity to take these cute little trades which he wants, these Swarm Hosts coming in and picking away at my units. And even though I definitely look at this game and say, I think I was a bit behind at quite a few points. I think if he droned up a bit more and went up to Hive Tech on my small economy, dealing with Zerglings, Roaches, Infestors, and Swarm Hosts hitting from all sides, how would I have ever got Tempests up to deal with Broodlords or something like that, right? I don't think I possibly could have. But it's just kind of cool to assess the game like this, see exactly how it went, and put that on. So while I put this back on my camera, I'm going to just look through my notes, see if there's any other really cool, important points, which I haven't actually touched on yet. I mean, essentially it is just weighing up the position. Of course, army positioning is very important. That's something you see me kind of talking about loosely there. And that's something where newer players definitely can't immediately just look at army positioning and have like a crazy advanced knowledge, as I am here, where they're talking about all the different minutiae of the positioning, counterattacking in 3 locations. But you kind of use your understanding to your own mechanical level. You know that if this was the same sort of situation in a Gold League game, Just a single charge lock counter attack in the main from the Warp Prism would be so hard for the Zerg player to deal with. You know, you don't need to be attacking the front, charge lock countering the north and the south at the same time while defending Zergling counterattacks. You play to your own skill levels. You play to exactly what's going on in that game. But if you can assess these advantages, these weaknesses and strengths in the game, it also gives you something to scout for. The way I'm constantly scouting for Hive this game, I just keep going into that main base over and over again, because I know if he surprises me with Hive tech, I'm going to need a lot of time to try and build up a bit more economy and get up an appropriate response for that. As he builds more and more Roaches and Ravagers at this point, you'll notice that my composition adjusts as well. More Immortals are being added in. I'm rebuilding my Templar Archives because that got sniped by Locusts, but I'm thinking if I can just get enough Immortals in here to beef this up, it's going to be a lot more robust. If you only have Archons, they don't really have that much range. They don't have the barrier ability of the Immortals either. And they don't have as much damage against Roaches. So a mass Roach Ravager Infestor army potentially can take down a lot of Archons, but if I add in a good number of Immortals, there's just no way he'll be able to deal with that. I'm just doing small little moves here to try and buy myself space because I just don't have that much stuff, and things just do get incredibly chaotic in this game. But you'll notice here that vision I was talking about. Oracle's tagging all over the place. Let's fast forward through and find the latter stages of this game. He's still got Swarmos down here being giant pains in the ass. That Void Ray coming in and out does finally get sniped down. And things start to wind up. So, going to be finishing up this show. If you guys have any questions in chat, do shout them out. Just want to show the rest of this game since we've watched so much of it. He starts coming in with some beautiful little Locust harass from the southern side. My Oracle there is just like trying to tag these Swarmos, which I think are burrowed, but he's already, I think, run them away. He's continuing to Nida Swarm all over the place. But this Immortal count, this Archon count is getting out of control. And because he hasn't transitioned, even though he has a decent amount of money, he got kind of frozen up on this army a little bit too much, a little bit too desperate to win as quickly as possible. Things have worked out. He's finally going to snipe this Nexus, which survived on 20 hit points earlier on. But I've rebuilt my third base, which still isn't mined out because he's killed it so many times. I've got this base in the middle. Archon's counterattacking in the main base. I'm going to pull him home after taking out his lair. He's only just rebuilding his lair now. That gives me a big comfort. Because if I got that lair, I know he can't go for Spire, or Hive at least, for a very long time. And here we're going to see some sick pro gamer skill. Oh my god, watch that Warp Prism. And it just gets fungal biled. GG's. Archons and Immortals, very good units though. Continuing to posture around, look for damage, and everything will be good. So I'm going to put that on my camera. I'm going to answer some questions in chat, see if there's anything really good there. Mungathu says, Pig, how do you ensure that your practice is efficient and effective, that you don't waste time on learning ROI stuff? I don't know what ROI is. I'm an idiot. What does ROI stand for? Yeah, I mean, there's return on investment. You're not talking about that, right? That sentence doesn't make sense. What? Oh, don't waste time on low learning, return on investment. Oh, okay. How to be efficient with your learning. Okay, sorry. I totally misread what you wrote there. Essentially just being, thinking about things. If you're trying to actually understand your games constantly and understand what you can do better and always look to do things better and have an idea of what you're improving on rather than just, I'm just gonna click on things faster, then you're always gonna play better. If you simply focus on the minutiae of what lost me this game or what is a big problem. If you start to think about your games more, you should naturally be learning more. If you start to try to solve those problems. If you learn to recognize those situations where you just feel like you have no idea, you just feel so lost against Phoenix openers or something, then you identify that's a problem and you solve it. A lot of players, try to play around their problems like that. They just say, oh, I've just got to rush my opponent before he ever gets to this unit. So that sort of mindset can hold people back a lot because they just say, no, I'm bad against this unit. So rather than trying to not be bad against that unit, they just kind of accept that they're not good against that unit and they never try and get better against it. So actually trying to identify, okay, how can I stop this being an issue? How can I stop this being a problem? Rather than simply, this is a problem, let's try and avoid that entire area of the game. I know a lot of players who are like, well, I struggle at 3 bases plus, so I'm just going to
play 1 and 2 base attacks the entire time I play StarCraft, and eventually they get a little bit bored of it. So it's important to always be willing to challenge yourself and kind of learn things which are outside your realm of skills, and accept that you're going to lose a lot of games while you're doing it. A lot of players are very focused on trying to win every single game, and if you're just focused on winning rather than actually kind of learning and trying out new responses, you won't be able to figure things out. You know, this game, for instance, when I kept talking about how I was trying to lure out those swarm hosts, those locusts defensively, kind of like we did there, and then pull back and let them run out. That's very hard to pull off, especially while defending counterattacks or doing other counterattacks of your own. And someone might screw it up once or twice and accidentally, like, you know, take a whole lot of damage to the locusts and then say, oh, this is shit, this doesn't work. The important thing is to sort of be somewhat stubborn and confident, and to just keep on trying those things until you get exceptionally good at them. So Blue says, what kind of an exercise can make me understand the game state better? So I think definitely trying to think about your common metrics in the game. Being able to look at a replay at any point, like we can right now, and say to yourself, okay, economy, what's the income? Now you can bring up the income tab as a bit of a cheat sheet, but it's important to look at also, you know, potential income. So you say, okay, there's a full mining base there. There's also what could be a full mining base here, but there's only 24 workers, or now 20 workers. So you say to yourself, oh, okay, so both players have pretty even shit economy, even though my income is higher right now. That can very quickly change. So you say, okay, economy, pretty even. We've both got extra patches to mine from. We don't have the workers to use them. Okay, cool. So we're both pretty much tied in economy. In army, I am at half the army supply. Oh shit. Okay, so this Zerg army definitely has a lot more meat in it. But you start to think then about all the minutiae of how that army works. So let's think about upgrades. You literally just go through this list. So like I said, it's the same way you'll hear commentators talk about a game when they say, oh, well, he's got these upgrades, he's got this much production, this much tech. These units are good against this unit, these units aren't. Just kind of going through all of that and figuring out where the advantages lie is important. Look at this army, and we say, Immortals, Archon, Storm, that is a roach-killing army. This army will obliterate any mid-tier Zerg army, unless the Zerg army outnumbers it an insane amount. However, that being said, because of the army supply difference, look at how many Roaches and Ravages there are. Maybe, especially since these Roaches and Ravages do have better upgrades. Oh, actually it's even now, +3 versus 2-1. If the Roaches and Ravagers come in with a perfect surround, maybe they can overwhelm this. You say, okay, well, you know what? The Protoss army here is a lot more effective, but there is more Zerg stuff. So if the Zerg could maybe split his army in half, distract with half the army, and then dive in and start killing all the production, maybe the Zerg has an opportunity there. So you can say to yourself, right now, there is a direct army engagement favoring towards the Protoss. If the Protoss can take a simple frontal fight where he's not completely surrounded or something, Protoss will win, even though he's vastly outnumbered. But Zerg has more stuff. So if Zerg can counterattack and run around behind, Zerg might still be able to make stuff happen. So you say, okay, composition-wise, much more efficient for Protoss, but because the Zerg still has numbers, he has speed, the bases are very spread out, maybe he still has an opportunity there. So it's you know, you start out with things like, okay, this army is better, therefore you should kill him before he gets too much of the better army. But then you start taking it to more advanced levels. You start to think about it in all these terms. You say to yourself, is there roach speed done? Yes. Is there the Hydra upgrade done? Yes, there is. Okay, these units become quite decent. Not only that, but you start to look at positioning as well. And I was waiting for this one point in the replay. Because, like I said, if I get surrounded, my army, this tiny little shitty Protoss army, tiny little high-quality elite army, I should say, is insane in a frontal fight if he's clumped up. But if he surrounds me, I just don't have nearly as many units as him, so it's still a bit scary. But what we see here is he moved up here, and I immediately moved around behind him to trap him. And I said, oh, if you have to attack down this ramp, I am going to massacre you. I'm going to massacre you with Storm, Archons, Immortals, right? So even though I actually... because I was even more behind like a minute ago or so. I was like super worried in this situation. I was like, oh, I need to kill his army. I'm losing so much economy. He could have another base mining up at home. I'm not even sure. I didn't realize that his economy was actually so small. My last like mining nexus is on red hit points up here with these 2 Archons barely defending it from the Mutalisks. I was like, oh, I need to kill his army. But if I lose this fight, it is over right now. It is over. So I was like, oh, dodge, bah. But then he does end up walking down the ramp. And we are going to see that, yeah, like I said, if he's not spread out from every angle, Storm's good unit. Protoss going to do pretty well. And that Zerg army just takes a massive amount of damage. So you start to look at all the complex angles in terms of army. You start with just who has more economy, who has more army. You follow the Artosis rule. You say, oh, he was expanding. Could I have attacked him? Yes, I could have. Damn, I missed that opportunity. Next time, let's remember to be ready for an attack around this time if I see him expand, or maybe I'll always build up to this attack and then I'll just scout. And as long as there's an expansion, I'll go through with the attack. You start to come up with these rules. You say, oh, you know what? I scouted him being really greedy. Like he was like building heaps of drones. I'm going to go attack. You say, okay, I scout someone being very aggressive. I'm going to defend. I'm going to use my defender's advantage, do a nice defense, and then I can maybe go counter push after that. But I'm really going to focus on just defending my bigger economy. You start to follow these rules, and so your assessments and your understanding of this part of StarCraft becomes a lot better as well. So just analyzing lots of games, constantly seeking to figure things out. And whenever you're lost in a game and you're unfamiliar with a situation, that's the most important game to try and understand. You're in a weird game like this. These are the games where you can look at this, and there's 20 different points in this game where the game state's entirely different. But looking at those moments and saying, what should I have done differently at this exact moment? Oh, you know what? I should have just gone and killed him at this moment. I think there was probably a moment earlier in this game, quite a few of them, where Vivid could probably look back at this replay and say, I was up 90 supply. If I just split my army in half, threatened the front while running into his main base, I could have killed all his production. There's no way he could have split up his army to deal with that. Damn, I missed that opportunity. Next time, and then he can think about what he was thinking in-game, and he can say, you know what? The thing I was missing was enough information. I wasn't scouting enough. Or maybe I scouted, but it just didn't click in my head that I could do this. That maneuver just wasn't in my head. But now the next time I'm in that position, I can make that choice. I can make that decision. It becomes really cool. Kalander says, I always have trouble identifying build orders from my opponent with different races. Is there a better way to learn this than just playing all the races? Definitely part of it is there's two things, right? There's common things your race will scout for. So hopping on the forums and saying, hey guys, what do I scout and react to against this race? Getting advice from other players of your race. Figuring out the most important things where you actually need to react. But on top of that, actually understanding your opponent's builds. You don't necessarily need to play that race all that much, but studying their builds, and if you're in, say, Gold or Platinum League, it doesn't need to be an intense understanding of their builds, but it can be simple tells. Understanding the basics of if he doesn't take a third base at 5 minutes, I know he's probably going to do a big 2-base attack, so I've got to build a lot of units to defend. It starts out simple like that. And as you progress, it goes to the advanced levels of, well, I can see that his factory and starport are swapping at 3 minutes 37. And because it's right then, I know that this is actually a 2 barracks stim medevac drop. And that's the build. And I know that from the exact timing my overlord peeks in and sees the starport finishing or something. But you don't need that until you're at a very high level. And even a lot of high level players will sometimes only really recognize that through game sense. They won't have the exact times memorized. But as you get to the top pro level, bam, they see the smallest tells. They know the exact build orders that their opponents are doing. And that was a very satisfying game to finally finish. I felt like I got punched in the face like 400 times that game. That was a really fun game. Shout out to Vivid for playing a very exciting, crazy, weird game with me. I kind of meandered along quite a bit this one because the replay was so long, and I felt like kind of just trying to talk about it a bit broadly. And it's something where it is very situational and every game is different. So I guess to kind of summarize all of this, because it's like, wait, all you really said, Pig, is use your knowledge to try and analyze games. Well, yeah, that's what it's about. It's about learning for yourself. The thing is, it's the same thing with chess, right? I keep bringing it back to this because this is what helps me understand what it's like to be a new player to a strategy game. And in chess, you take away all the mechanics. All of that was gone for me. And I came into it like, okay, cool. I just get to play the strategy, right? I just get to do the positioning. And you can both see everything that's going on. There's no scouting. There's no hidden information. There's no gambles. Okay, cool. What's a build order? Look up a guide or something. And it's like, wait, there's no guides in this game that simply tell you exactly what to do. They can say, well, here's a decent opening sequence. But I very quickly realized there was a huge number of different branches and patterns, which makes sense, right? Because there's no mechanics. You can't just mechanically just focus on building stuff, or you can't just, I'm just really good at putting my pawns out. Like I'm really, so yeah, I had to focus just on the strategy side of things. And I realized so quickly that, you need to start getting this kind of understanding of how to look at the board, so that you can look at options, because that's all a strategy game is. It's never as clear cut as, 3 moves in, I know you need to attack in this direction. Same in StarCraft. There's too many different ways your opponent can play and react. So if you ever try to go into it with just like this is the game plan and this is how the game's going to play out and I can't respond to anything in the game, you do lose out on a lot of StarCraft. And when you're first learning StarCraft, it's fine to kind of have that very simple game plan, but the real beauty and the fun of the game is when there starts being back and forth and things go completely off book because your opponent responds in a way where your first plan can't continue to work and you go, shit, how do I change? How do I adjust? And it's the beauty of understanding the implications of these decisions and how they shift the metrics. I made a decision to commit to more army. I am now, because I wasn't building as much economy, I'm down in economy. My economy went down and I shifted it, so now my army is ahead. Okay, how do I play to that? I need to then pressure, attack with that army, look to do damage, and maybe I can then build my economy back up while I'm doing that behind that. And you start to see there's so many different choices. And if you can understand those choices, you can always make a coherent plan. And there's something I always tell people in StarCraft is you can make any strategy you want work up to the top of GM. Complaining about balance, pointless, so dumb. There are pro gamers who just do crazy, weird strategies, creative builds, units which no one else uses. And you can absolutely do that as well at your level. It's just about understanding how it works and trying to figure out, okay, what does this change in the game? If you can figure those factors out, you start to make educated decisions. And like I said, I looked at a weird, crazy game here. A lot of games won't be as complex as analyzing this game. It'll be a lot simpler. You compare the army, you compare the workers, you look at the map position and you say, bam, this player's ahead in economy and upgrades. This guy's way ahead in army. That army guy needs to go kill him right now because otherwise he's going to get further behind in our upgrades because the other guy's continuing to upgrade and he's got more economy. So his army is going to catch up and it's going to have better upgrades and then his army is going to overtake. You start to make these assessments and everything becomes very interesting and exciting and all sorts of choices open up in front of you. I've blathered on for a very long time though, guys, so I appreciate all of you who have watched to the end of today's video. I know there's a lot of things that are a lot less obvious to me, which is why I like to dawdle on these topics a little bit, because otherwise I can very easily skim over things, which I know a lot of players who aren't as experienced as me don't consciously think about. So even though to me, there's a part of my brain that says, yeah, this is obvious, like just skim this topic or just move past this, trying to actually talk about that and kind of simplify my own brain process with StarCraft to actually think about the kind of mechanics underneath everything and how I look at a game and assess things is something which I think is very important. Hopefully you guys can take a lot away from. All right, guys. I'm still playing chess, guys. I'm still playing chess. So I'm gonna continue answering a few of those questions in chat. For you guys who are around, for you guys on YouTube, thank you so much for hanging out. I will be back tomorrow with some more dailies. For any of you guys who are looking for build orders, go check out Sporting Tool. I've already started to throw a lot of build orders up there. A few of them have been featured on Team Liquid as we all partnered together nicely. Yeah, check it out. All of my recent videos, you'll find links in the comment section, pinned to the top of the comment section to those build order guides. But for the moment, I will be back. I think tomorrow we'll do TVT. Nice TVT solid opening with a little bit of a Raven Viking tank push. But anyway, guys, I'll catch you tomorrow. Don't forget to hug a watermelon, kick a walrus in the cankle, and of course, punch a garden gnome to the moon. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye and good night.